You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is David Smith, Senior Analyst for the Morgan Report, which you can find online at silver-investor.com. Welcome to the show, David.
Good to be speaking with you, Jim.
Today we'll be talking about the Great Migration. No, it's not the settlers heading into the west of North America. It's precious metals headed the other way, David. Maybe explain.
Well, you look at what happened last year, which was extremely pronounced, of the movement of gold and silver into the coffers of Indians and Chinese. And I would suggest that that could qualify as a great precious metals migration from west to east. This has been taking place for several years, but it's really picked up speed now. And my sense is, although I can't really define it, and I don't think anybody else can either in terms of quantity, is that for all the ounces that we know about that are supposedly above ground, in other words, where we can see the statistics that are where they're going, there's many, many more ounces of gold and silver that are proceeding underground to the east from the west in terms of filling their coffers.
What's the primary reason behind it? I know China's been stocking up on gold.
Well, we know the one that you hear a lot about, that the Chinese may someday have a gold-backed yuan currency, or that they want to use that as a secondary holding to back their paper and use it for trade and exchange. But I would say that there's another thing. We talked about this a little bit last week, which would qualify it as a good news story, and that is that the Indians and the Chinese are becoming more affluent, and they have a very great appetite for gold and silver in jewelry form, in monetary form. Many of them do not have bank accounts where they have their money in it, plus it's a different form of money. And so that kind of discretionary income becoming more available as their economy strengthens leads more and more of that money to go into purchase of the precious metals.
The election in India also is going to have an impact, you believe?
Yes, it appears that Narendra Modi won overwhelming voting as the new prime minister, and he has established a record of being friendly toward the free market practices, and he's apparently appears to be quite an honest individual in terms of a lot of the corruption which takes place in India. And so that could be good news for the metals purchases if the economy continues to strengthen, which it has really been showing strength lately. Also, there's the additional aspect. There is talk that the fairly heavy duties on the import of gold may be either lowered or dropped altogether, which would be very bullish for above the radar importation of gold into India.
And that's going to make people there a little more law-abiding as well, because studies showed that smuggled gold had surpassed smuggled drugs, and no one ever thought that would ever happen.
Right. So all these things bode well for the movement of gold and silver into India as well as China going forward.
People are going to be showing up at their bank, if they have a bank, as you said, or a place to secure their gold. You're not supposed to have that, sir. Well, it just happened to show up today.
Right. You know, China for thousands of years has operated under a system called the tributary system, and it's kind of fascinating both in terms of the practice of it and also the symbolism of it. But the Chinese have viewed, and I suspect they even feel that way today, themselves as the center of the civilized world. And going back to, over 2,000 years, whenever they had contact with outsiders, the outsiders were expected to pay some type of tribute to them and follow certain customs and this type of a thing. In fact, it was so entrenched that by the time that the Japanese refused to pay tribute to the Chinese, it actually brought about a war between India and China, where the Mongols tried on 2 separate occasions unsuccessfully to invade Japan. And so the tribute, if you think about it in nature, a tributary is a small stream that feeds a larger stream or river. And so here we have today, we have what I would call tributary system of precious metals flowing into China. Small streams from all over the world. Some of these are cash streams where the Chinese go in and actually buy, probably in Africa and other places, for cash and bring the gold back. So they're consuming everything that they produce. They don't export the gold. Plus they're buying all this from around the world. So here we have a kind of a precious metals tributary system which is feeding the Chinese desire for more gold.
And yet, they're doing it at such a, calm rate or no panic buying that they've managed to keep the price of gold from skyrocketing, even though they're cornering the market.
That's a very good point. You don't see them going out and buying with abandon and making large public purchases. They're very subtle about it. And if you know anything about Chinese history and how they go about doing things, they don't do it with a lot of flash. They're just very methodical. They're very long-term oriented, and they're very specific in how they approach things. And they get that done without roiling the waters too much.
I was going to say, so a little more than just the next quarterly report. It's a 5-year plan, a 10, a 20, a 50. Well, I wonder which kind of a plan this is.
Well, this is a long-term plan, but I think we're going to find out in a fairly short time, perhaps in the next year or so, get some serious indications as to how much they've accumulated. And I can pretty much guarantee you that they're not going to stop at that point either.
I know about a month ago, we were expecting a report on the Chinese gold index, something they hadn't done in 5 years. No word on that index, and perhaps we never will hear.
Difficult to say, Jim, but, that was an anniversary, as you mentioned, and people would assume that, that would come out. But again, the Chinese aren't going to just stick to specific dates that everybody's waiting for, like we have a corporate report coming out in the West. Again, they do things a little bit more differently and more subtly, and also sometimes more profoundly successful.
I mentioned the two big Ps, palladium and platinum. What's happening?
Well, the PGMs have certainly remained strong, and of course on everybody's radar list has to do with the strikes that have been going on in South Africa. But the supply-demand aspects are so profound in terms of higher metals prices that, this is really a blip on the screen. It's not going to solve the underlying systemic issue of the question of how much supply is actually going to be there. And I was just looking at the chart of palladium this morning, and it's really, the price is knocking on 5-year highs. So they're about $20 from that. And platinum is not sure if it's quite that strong, but almost. And I think the two are going to kind of be like relay runners going forward over the next couple years as we see one moving forward and the other lagging for a little bit and then moving up. So actually looking at a 5-year chart of platinum, it is substantially below its 5-year high. But if you look at 25-year charts of these two PGMs, you'll see that they're perfectly capable of running and making moonshots all by themselves. They don't have to do it in tandem. They're not dragged along like gold and silver are, where Adam Hamilton, among others, have noted that there's over a 90% correlation within a given time frame between the directional move of gold and silver. But platinum and palladium, even though they're very much related to each other, do not have to move in that kind of sync.
Different than gold and silver.
Yes.
Although silver hasn't been tagging along with gold the way it usually does either. Why is that?
Well, again, this is a fairly short-term phenomenon, but if you look at it over a period of months, you'll see that will work itself out, or even weeks. So the disconnect does not stay going too awful long in terms of the metals. Right now, they're both pretty quiet, and so you could make a statement that neither one of them are really trending. But when the metals are trending, when gold is trending, at some point fairly soon thereafter, you'll see silver trending in the same direction. They're not a day-to-day correlation, but over weeks and months, they correlate very closely together.
Thanks a lot for chatting with us, David.
You bet, Jim. It's been great speaking with you today.
My guest has been David Smith, Senior Analyst for the Morgan Report, which you can find online at silver-investor.com. You're listening to HowStreet.com Radio. Find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. Comments about the show can be sent to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard.